grew up in a small town close to Frankfurt, Germany. We're used to immigrants there. Around 1/3 of the population has both parents from another country. So our family situation was not so unusual, with a grandmother who kept moving back and forth between our house and her apartamento in São Paulo. And one of the Brazilian cousins was often staying with us. We had friends from Yugoslavia, Italy, Turkey, Pakistan. Our elementary school friends really loved to play at our house. We didn't have the popular toys a lot of them had, but out in the backyard, we could do whatever we wanted. We even built a zip line from the chimney to the pine tree. Much later, around 97, both my sister and I had finished with these attempts of playing house with boyfriends, and we had moved back in, but also living in the 3-bedroom house where my mother and her boyfriend, and his little son, and my friend Maha, and occasionally one of the Brazilians. Coming home, one day you might smell samosas baking. The other, my mother might be making caipirinhas. Or we would just have traditional German Kaffee und Kuchen. For Christmas, we included our father and his wife, and then my mother's boyfriend's grown-up kids and their mother. And then our friends would come by later, once they were done with all the mandatory duties with their own folks. So why am I telling you all this? I assume that most of you know families like that, or you're part of one, because it's human nature. We love one another, we take care of one another, and of course we take in a few strays. But when I talk to people and they tell me they grew up in families like this, they talk about this weird and crazy family as if it's something they're lightly ashamed of. And sure, it can get chaotic at times. But what looks like dysfunction on paper can be immensely enriching and fulfilling as long as everybody is contributing and appreciated. Co-living these days is becoming a trendy term for sharing a house with a group of people who have interests in common. Multi-generation housing is being discussed as the solution for the aging population, as if it was a new idea. What really is new is this concept, the one we've all been sold on. Young couples, they're supposed to buy a starter home, and then they get the next size up once they have children. But the ideal family never has more than 2 generations under one roof. And if you don't have a spouse, you're supposed to live alone. That is not natural. It's not sustainable. And it's not what human beings need. We have always lived in tribes. It takes a village, not only to raise children, also to just live a healthy, happy life. Now for me, having an extended family under one roof, that was the norm and not an exception. So then filling a house with people who I chose to become my family, that was just an extension of the same idea. I knew that already. But I was surprised when I came here to the US and I talked to people, and so many Americans, they just don't get it. They vaguely remember college, and they cannot imagine anything functional with housemates who really do the dishes. I looked up some data, and I found out why. Because the nuclear family was actually quite common in England already in the 13th century. So that idea just got carried over into the US. And in the rest of the world, we continued to live in tribes. While we became more affluent, we could afford a little more privacy. But we still surrounded ourselves with the people who we loved the most. Now this is how the middle class lives in Germany. It's a very typical boring street in Dietzenbach, where I grew up. All the houses have multiple apartments, and it's normal that they're filled with friends and family. And if they're rented out, over the years, those renters become family friends. We have a lot of recent research on positive psychology these days. We know it's more than a cheesy quote when we say happiness is only real when it's shared. Do you want to live to a healthy 100? Social support strengthens the immune system. It lowers your blood pressure. It can help wounds heal faster. So yes, you can kiss it better. And you don't need to give up your privacy. All you need is a small number of people who you're close to, who you see on a daily basis, who you can confide in. And I say need, because close connections are not just nice to have, they're vital for your health. In 2010, Julianne Holt-Lunstad did a meta-analysis of 148 studies with over 300,000 participants and found out loneliness is more dangerous than smoking or obesity. Whether it's cancer or heart disease or complications from infections, people who have close connections in their life have a 50% better survival rate. So think about how many people really know all of your secrets. Americans were asked 30 years ago how many confidants they had. They said 2.5. Well, that's an average. Nowadays, that number is below 1. And half of all Americans trust nobody. To our million-year-old survival mechanisms, that means being in mortal danger all the time, because the one who strays too far from the herd gets eaten. People like me, who live alone, can't even sleep properly, because subconsciously, we're on alert. We're always ready for fight or flight. Now we know how dangerous it is to have constantly elevated stress hormone levels. And that's not only for physical health, it's even more a factor in mental health and happiness. People who live alone have an 80% higher likelihood of developing depression. And actually, rates of all mental health problems go up by multiples with each lost connection. Now, I've been doing this living alone thing for 2 years now, and in the beginning I loved it because I'm rather introverted. By now, it's been making me somewhat crazy. And don't worry about me, I already fixed it. I literally moved in yesterday into a beautiful house with a really supportive housemate. But in the long run, sharing with just one person, it's not my retirement plan. This is more like what I'm looking forward to. I love how co-housing communities are on the rise internationally and in the US. Co-housing, that's kind of the luxury version of co-living. It's usually several living units grouped into a mini village around a big common house with areas for cooking and dining, playing and working. Simpler ways to do that are tiny home communities or repurposed motels, hostels, even shopping malls. You can find tons of examples. If you look it up online, you can look up for co-housing, co-living, intentional communities. Now, I would love to visit all of them. Do a few interviews, share a few meals. Whether you stay with your family of origin, or you form a chosen one, whether you live with your loved ones under one roof, or you just reach out to next-door neighbors, I believe we can make home what it has always been if we continue building our villages. So I'm counting on you to join us. Thank you.